Before you begin, this story is a journey into darkness, where fear is not just a reaction, but a part of you, lurking, waiting to consume you. Escape is an illusion. The voices, the figures, are not mere imagination. Once you step in, there's no turning back. The nightmare has already begun. There is no waking up. It was the kind of night that felt heavier than usual. The moon hung low in the sky, but its light was swallowed by the thick clouds that seemed to cling to the city, like an unwanted memory. In the heart of the bustling city, nestled between towering glass buildings and endless streets, Max sat alone in his small apartment, the hum of his old refrigerator the only sound filling the room. He was used to silence. It was his companion. But tonight, something felt different. There was an unease in the air, a crackling tension he couldn't shake. Max stared at his laptop screen, trying to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting. The faint scratching noise he'd heard earlier had stopped, but he couldn't forget it. It was almost as if someone had been there, behind him. He glanced over his shoulder. The dim light from the hallway barely made it into his living room, casting long, thin shadows on the walls. His apartment felt colder than usual. He stood up, shrugging off the chill creeping into his bones, and walked to the kitchen, opening the fridge for something to calm his nerves. As he reached for the bottle of water, the lights flickered. It wasn't unusual for the lights to act up in the building, but tonight the flicker seemed deliberate. Max froze. He wasn't alone. His phone buzzed suddenly, the vibration startling him. Max reached for it, almost relieved to have something to distract him. The message was from a number he didn't recognize. "I see you." His heart skipped a beat. "Who is this?" he typed, fingers trembling slightly. No reply came for what felt like an eternity. Then, another message. "You know what you did?" Max's stomach turned. He had no idea who this was, but the words felt personal. His palms were sweaty now, his mind racing. The air around him grew heavier. He could feel his pulse in his ears. He thought he heard breathing, but no one was there. The fridge light flickered again, and when it came back on, Max saw something in the reflection of the glass door. A shadow, tall, thin. It stood behind him, perfectly still, but as soon as he turned around, there was nothing there. Max's breath hitched in his throat. His eyes darted around the room, but he saw only the quiet emptiness. The shadow had vanished. The phone buzzed again, pulling him back to reality. The new message was a picture. He clicked it open, his hands shaking. The picture was blurry, taken from a distance, but it was unmistakable. It was his apartment, the exact corner of the room he was standing in. Max's heart raced. Whoever was sending these messages was watching him. He tried to think logically. Maybe it was a prank, but something about it felt too real. The pictures, the messages. It felt as though this person knew him in a way no one else did. They were getting closer. Then another message popped up. "I'm not leaving." Max's skin prickled. The words felt like a promise, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He slammed the phone down on the counter, but the buzzing continued, louder now. There was no escape. Max couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The dark room felt colder, the air thick with an unsettling presence. The lights flickered, casting strange warped shadows on the walls. His heart quickened. The phone buzzed again. Who could it be? Max pulled it from his pocket, heart racing. The screen flashed with a new message. "You can't hide." His stomach churned. He quickly typed back, his hands trembling. "Who is this? What do you want?" The reply came almost instantly. "I've always been here, watching." Max's pulse spiked. He couldn't remember the last time he felt this afraid. It felt like this person knew him, like they were inside his thoughts. He thought back to moments that had seemed insignificant at the time. The occasional flickering light, the soft creaks of the floorboards late at night, the feeling that someone was always watching from the corners of his eyes. The apartment was unnervingly quiet, too quiet. Max paced nervously, gripping his phone tighter. He needed answers. Another buzz. "I'm in the apartment." His heart dropped. Max glanced around, suddenly aware of every little noise. The hum of the refrigerator, the rustling of the curtains, the soft tapping sound of something faintly against the walls. There was no one there. He moved toward the hallway, trying to stay calm, but the air felt thick, stifling. It was as if something was just out of sight, waiting. The whisper came, software so soft it was almost a breath. "Max." Max froze, his blood running cold. It was close, so close. He spun around, but nothing. Another message. He glanced at it, his stomach lurching as he read, "You can't escape." The words sent a cold shiver through him. Panic surged through his chest. He moved quickly toward the door, fumbling with the lock. It wouldn't budge. He didn't remember locking it. The knob slipped under his shaking fingers. "Max ... The whisper was right behind him, almost in his ear. Max turned quickly. He had to get out. But before he could take a step, he saw it. In the corner of the room, a shadow, tall, thin. It barely moved but was unmistakably there. He blinked and it was gone. Max's chest tightened. He couldn't breathe. His phone buzzed once more, a final message. The game has only just begun. Max felt his legs give way as the lights above him flickered violently, then plunged the apartment into complete darkness. The silence swallowed him whole. He wasn't alone anymore. Max could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on him, thick and suffocating. His breath came in short, panicked gasps as he stumbled forward, blindly reaching out for anything to anchor him. The phone in his hand buzzed again, the vibration in his palm a sharp contrast to the eerie stillness of the room. He lifted it, his fingers shaking uncontrollably. The screen glowed dimly in the dark, showing another message. "You can't run from me." Max's heart skipped a beat. The words felt like a threat, something far more real than any prank or joke. His skin crawled, the hairs on his neck standing at attention. He wanted to scream, but his voice felt trapped in his throat. There was no one to hear him. With trembling hands, he dialed 911, the faint ringing in his ear the only sound other than the thumping of his heart. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. The call disconnected abruptly. Max pulled the phone away, staring at it. The screen flashed for a second, then froze. His pulse hammered in his chest as he held the phone to his ear, hoping for a signal that didn't come. The silence around him deepened. A sense of hopelessness settled in his gut. Then the whisper came again. "Max ... It was right behind him, the voice now a low, guttural sound, as though it was speaking from the very walls themselves. He spun around, heart pounding, but the apartment was empty. He was still alone. But it didn't feel that way. It felt like something or someone was closing in. He backed away slowly, the shadows stretching unnaturally long as the dim moonlight fought to break through the cracks in the curtains. Max glanced at the door again, then the window. He needed to get out. He had to. He took one hesitant step toward the door, but before he could reach the handle, he froze. Something was different. The walls, they were closer. The space around him felt tighter, as if the apartment itself was shrinking. Max's eyes darted to the corners of the room, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The edges of the walls seemed to warp, as though they were bending inward, the angles no longer sharp but curved. The air felt thinner now, almost suffocating, pressing down on his chest with every breath. "Max, you're mine now." The voice was clearer, colder. It sounded as though it was coming from the very air around him, whispering his name from every corner of the room. Max's heart pounded in his ears. The shadows danced around him, no longer just a trick of the light. They were alive, stretching and twitching, reaching for him. His hands were clammy, his throat dry. He took another step back, eyes wide with terror. The walls kept closing in. He could feel them, he could hear them. The soft scraping sound, like fingernails on glass, was getting louder, louder. His breath caught in his throat as a shape began to form from the darkness in the corner of the room. Slowly, like it was emerging from the walls themselves, a figure began to take shape. It was tall. Its features were indistinct, shifting, impossible to focus on. But Max could feel it. It was watching him. "You'll never leave," the voice said, its tone low and mocking. "You've always belonged to me." Max stumbled backward, his mind racing. He was trapped. There was no escape. The walls were too close now, and the shadows surrounded him, pulling him deeper into the darkness. His phone buzzed one last time. The message read, "It's too late." Max's pulse faltered as he realized the truth. There was no one coming to help him. No one to save him. He was alone, and it had only just begun. Max couldn't sleep. The apartment, once a place of comfort, now felt like a prison. Every creak, every whisper in the air kept him awake, on edge. The shadows twisted unnaturally, and the feeling of being watched never left him. Max ... The voice was soft, almost distant, but Max knew it wasn't just in his head. He whipped around, but the room remained empty, silent. Yet, the weight of the darkness in the corners of the room pressed down on him. He tried to focus. He had to. His phone buzzed. Another message. "You can't escape me." His breath hitched. He opened the message, but the words made his skin crawl. He had to leave. He couldn't stay here anymore. He rushed to the door, but the handle wouldn't turn. It was locked. No, it was as if the door itself was resisting him. Panic surged through him. He turned to look around the room. The shadows, once still, were now crawling along the walls. They seemed to move, stretch, and shift, as if they had a life of their own. He stepped back, his pulse racing. "Max, you're mine now." The voice was louder this time, close, almost inside his ear. He backed away toward the window. He had to get out. Pulling the blinds up, he looked outside, but there was nothing. The street was empty, deserted, bathed in the pale light of street lamps. Then the scraping noise started again, low and harsh, coming from behind him. Max turned sharply, eyes searching, but saw nothing. Just the shadows, too still, too empty. "Max, you can't run from me." Max's legs felt weak, but he kept moving. The room felt smaller now. The walls seemed to close in. His chest tightened. He ran to the phone, but it wouldn't work. The screen flickered, then froze. His heart pounded in his ears. "You belong to me." Max dropped the phone, his hands shaking. He could hear it now. The sound of something dragging along the floor, scraping, relentless. The shadows were thicker, darker. He couldn't see them, but he could feel them, closing in on him. Every breath felt suffocating. Then the whispers stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Max took a step forward, his hands slick with sweat. He could hear his own heart in the stillness, but the silence didn't last long. There, in the corner of the room, a figure stood, tall, distorted. Its face was featureless, a blur of dark shadows and twisted shapes. Max couldn't breathe. His chest tightened. "It's too late, Max." The voice was cold, mocking, and all-consuming. It wasn't just the room anymore. The darkness was alive, surrounding him, pulling at him, dragging him into the depths. Max turned, stumbling, trying to escape, but the walls were pressing in on him. The door was still locked. The shadows were everywhere. He was trapped, and the figure stepped forward. Max's pulse thundered in his ears as the figure moved closer. The air grew thick, suffocating, as if the room itself was closing in on him. His legs shook, but he forced himself to stay upright, to not let the fear consume him. "You can't outrun this," the voice whispered, low and taunting. It was everywhere, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the very air around him. Max's breath caught in his throat as he stumbled backward. The shadows were alive, wrapping around him like an unseen force. He needed to get out. He had to. But the door, it was still locked. The window, blocked. There was no escape, no way out. "Max, it's over." The figure was right in front of him now, towering over him like a dark, twisted silhouette. Max couldn't look away. He felt paralyzed, as if every muscle in his body refused to move. His heart hammered painfully in his chest, and the whispers were growing louder. The room seemed to close in on him, the darkness swallowing him whole. He could see it now, the figure's face, or rather, what should have been a face. It was a blur of darkness, shifting and morphing, never settling. Max's stomach churned as he looked at it, his body trembling violently. "Max, you belong to me." The voice was not just in his ears anymore. It was inside his head, resonating in the very core of his being. His thoughts were muddled, swirling around him like a storm. What was real? What was a nightmare? Was any of this even happening? Max's vision blurred. He couldn't think straight. His mind was unraveling. The walls, the darkness, the figure, they were all part of the same nightmare. A nightmare he couldn't escape. The air in the room felt thick, like he was breathing through mud. His thoughts were clouded with terror. The shadows were moving faster now, swirling, wrapping around his feet, his legs, pulling him down, drawing him in. "You can't escape, Max. You're mine." Max's breath came faster, his chest tightening with every word. He couldn't move, couldn't escape. His legs felt like lead, his arms heavy as though they were made of stone. He couldn't breathe. But then, he felt something. A small, faint whisper of hope. Something deep inside him, fighting to stay alive. Max's hand reached out toward the figure, trembling, but his fingers brushed against nothing. The darkness was consuming him, pulling him into itself, but there was something fighting it. Something in his mind, telling him he wasn't done yet. "Max." The voice was softer now, almost coaxing. It was like a lullaby, sweet and insidious. It promised safety, promised escape, but Max knew better. He wasn't free. He was trapped in a nightmare, and this time, there was no waking up. Max, it's too late. The figure's voice was final now, absolute. Max's heart stopped as the room swirled into nothingness. But then, just before the darkness swallowed him whole, he felt a sudden, sharp clarity. A flash of memory, a face, his own face, staring back at him in the mirror, as if to remind him of something he had forgotten, something that could save him. And in that moment, Max made a choice. Max's mind raced. The world around him was a whirlwind of shadows, flickering and warping. His body was frozen, paralyzed in terror, but inside, something was stirring. It was a memory, a glimmer of something, a feeling he couldn't fully grasp, but knew he had to hold on to. You're mine, Max. The voice was cold, final, but there was a hesitation now, a small crack in the darkness that hadn't been there before. Max's heart pounded harder. He could feel the weight of the shadows closing in, but this time, it felt different. The fear, the suffocating presence, it wasn't as all-consuming. Max's eyes snapped open. The room was still dark, but the figure had stopped advancing. It hovered in the space in front of him, like a storm waiting to strike. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, but he couldn't afford to waste it. The memories were rushing back now, flickering images of the life he had before all of this. Faces, places, a life before the darkness found him. What do you want from me? Max's voice cracked, barely a whisper. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it tilted its head, as if considering the question. The shadows around Max seemed to pulse with a life of their own, a slow, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat. Max could feel it in his chest now. I want you to surrender, the figure finally spoke, its voice dripping with malice. All of you, your fear, your mind, your soul. Max's breath hitched. His thoughts were clouded, but something was breaking through. He remembered the face in the mirror. He remembered the life he had before he stepped into this nightmare. It was a fleeting memory, but it was enough. The figure before him wasn't invincible. It could be beaten, but how? Max's hands trembled as he took a step back, then another. The figure's eyes, if they could be called eyes, followed his every movement, but it didn't move forward. It waited. It wanted him to give in, to believe that it was too late. But Max wasn't ready to die. Not like this. No, he whispered, more to himself than to the figure. I'm not yours. The words felt foreign on his tongue, but they were true. He wasn't going to give in. Not without a fight. Max's hands shook, but he clenched his fists. The darkness around him seemed to recede, just a little, as if it were recoiling at his defiance. He didn't know what had changed. He didn't know how long this moment would last, but he felt something inside him snap, something deep, primal, and untamed. The shadows hissed, a terrible sound that sent a chill down his spine. The figure stepped forward, closer now, but Max didn't back away. His mind was clearer now, sharp, focused. The figure's power wasn't absolute. It fed off his fear, but Max wouldn't let it anymore. The air crackled. It felt electric, like the calm before a storm. You're making a mistake, Max, the figure warned. This is where it ends. Max's heart was still racing, but the fear no longer controlled him. He could feel the presence of something larger than the darkness, a force beyond the figure, a choice, and he chose to fight. Max's chest tightened, but the fear wasn't there anymore. The darkness that had once consumed him now felt distant, like a fading memory. The figure before him pulsed with anger, its form shifting in grotesque ways, but Max held his ground. The air crackled, the energy between them growing thicker. The shadows writhed around him, attempting to pull him back into the abyss. But Max wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "You think you can fight me?" The figure's voice was mocking, but there was a flicker of uncertainty, a small crack in its malevolent facade. Max's breath was steady now. His mind wasn't clouded. He was free, at least in this moment. The clarity felt strange, but it was a lifeline. The figure stepped closer, its presence oppressive, but Max stood firm, refusing to give in to its power. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," the figure sneered, its dark tendrils reaching for him, trying to invade his mind. Max closed his eyes for a moment, focusing. The past was a blur, but he remembered something important. He remembered his connection to this place. The moment he had crossed the threshold, he had made a choice to confront this darkness. And now, that choice was his weapon. But every weapon comes with a price. "You don't understand, Max," the figure growled as its voice changed, becoming more distorted, more furious. "You can't win." Max's heart raced again, but he didn't waver. The room around him flickered, shifting between light and shadow. The struggle was real. The price of defying this entity would be steep, but he wasn't going to be its puppet anymore. He clenched his fist tighter, and the darkness recoiled slightly, as if it had never felt such resistance. "This ends now," Max muttered under his breath. He could feel the shadows, the cold, encroaching on him once more, but his defiance pushed it back. His resolve was unshakable. He wasn't running. He wasn't giving in. The figure shrieked, the sound echoing in the room, like 1,000 voices being torn apart. The air around Max pulsed with an unbearable pressure. He could feel his body beginning to tremble, the physical toll of his fight against the entity seeping into him. But he pushed through. He remembered his family, his friends, the world outside this nightmare. There was something waiting for him, something worth fighting for. The shadows screamed louder, but Max didn't flinch. The figure raised its arms, its body contorting, ready to strike. "You'll pay for this," the figure hissed, its voice dripping with venom. "I will claim you, Max. You will regret this decision." Max's heart pounded in his chest, and the darkness around him closed in tighter. But he knew one thing for certain. No matter the cost, he couldn't let the figure win. Not like this. In that moment, as the figure lunged forward, Max made his final choice. Max's breath came in ragged gasps as the darkness closed in around him. He could feel the weight of the figure's wrath bearing down on him, its presence suffocating, a palpable force trying to crush him from all sides. The room trembled as though the very fabric of reality was unraveling. The figure's form twisted and writhed, its voice now a dissonant chorus, rising and falling in unnatural rhythms. "You think you can fight me, Max?" it crooned, its tone both amused and enraged. "I've been in your mind long enough to know your every weakness. You cannot escape me." Max staggered, his legs barely able to support him, as the shadows seemed to tighten their grip. He could feel them pulling him, dragging him down into the void, his vision blurred, and the air became thick, oppressive. The darkness whispered promises of despair, urging him to surrender. But Max didn't surrender. "No," he said, his voice hoarse but unwavering. "I won't be yours." He could feel the energy, the tension, building up inside him. A strange, unfamiliar power. It wasn't his strength, but something else. A force he didn't understand, but it was there, within him, pulsing, responding to his defiance. The figure stopped moving. For a brief moment, everything became eerily still. The shadows froze. The oppressive air paused, as if even the darkness itself was holding its breath. Max could feel the pressure, the weight of it all, and then something snapped. Max's body convulsed as the shadows recoiled, as if they were retreating from an unseen force. His vision went white for a second, a searing flash of light cutting through the darkness. The figure howled in fury, its twisted form flickering and distorting, as if it was being torn apart by the light. Max felt his mind strain under the pressure, the weight of the battle taking its toll. His body was on the brink of collapse, his muscles screaming, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't let up now. "You will regret this," the figure spat, its voice cracking with rage. "You cannot win. You will never escape." But Max didn't listen. His grip on the force within him tightened. The shadows recoiled even further, and with it, Max felt the room shift. The walls cracked, the air stilled, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the darkness seemed to falter. The light surged again, bright and blinding. Max's heart hammered in his chest as the figure screeched in agony. The pain that radiated from it was palpable, like a physical force that struck at the very core of Max's being. But he didn't stop. He pushed back, focusing all of his energy on the light, on the force within him that was slowly driving the darkness away. And then, as quickly as it had started, it was over. The room went silent. The oppressive air lifted, and the shadows vanished. Max dropped to his knees, his entire body trembling, sweat pouring down his face. The light faded, leaving him in an eerie stillness. He could barely process what had just happened. He had fought. He had won. But at what cost? He felt hollow, like a part of him had been ripped away in the struggle. The figure was gone, but a remnant of its presence lingered, a dark stain on the air that refused to leave. Max couldn't understand what had just occurred. He was free, for now, but the cost was heavy. He didn't know how much longer he could hold on to this fragile victory. As he struggled to regain his bearings, a single thought echoed in his mind. It's not over. Max's breath came in shallow, erratic gasps. The silence that followed his victory over the dark figure felt almost worse than the chaos. His mind raced, but there was something lingering, something beneath the stillness. The shadows had retreated, yes, but in their place, a faint vibration pulsed through the air. A whisper, low and almost imperceptible, echoed in his ears. "You think you're free?" Max froze. His heart skipped. He looked around, but the room was empty. His pulse quickened as the voice grew louder, not just in his mind, but in the very air around him. "I'm always here, Max. You can't escape me." It wasn't just the after effects of the battle. This was real. The dark figure was gone, but its voice, its presence remained, lingering like an infection in his thoughts. Max stumbled backward, trying to shake it off, but the voice only grew louder, more persistent. It echoed within him, clawing at his sanity. "I am your shadow, your deepest fear. You will never be free." The words cut through him, deep and jagged. He couldn't escape. Not this time. His body froze, unable to move, as if the darkness had wrapped itself around him again, tightening its grip. The room felt colder, darker. Then, through the cacophony of the figure's voice, a new sound emerged. A whisper, faint but clear. Max. Max's eyes widened. This voice, it wasn't the figure's. It was human, familiar. His chest tightened as he strained to hear it again. Max, listen to me, the voice urged, more insistent now. It's not too late. You still have a choice. Max's hands trembled. He looked around the room once more, but there was no one there. Just the void, the same oppressive darkness. Yet, this voice, it felt like a thread of hope in a sea of despair. Who are you? Max whispered, his voice raw, uncertain. There was a long pause before the voice responded, its tone softer now, reassuring. I'm your way out. You've come this far. You just have to keep going. Max's heart pounded. He didn't understand. Who was this? How did they know him? His mind was a mess, and the walls of the room seemed to warp around him, as if reality itself was cracking. The voice grew clearer, stronger. You're not alone, Max. Fight. You still have the strength to win. Max swallowed hard. The weight of everything, the figure, the darkness, crushed down on him. He didn't know if he was ready to face what came next, but he knew he couldn't stop now. Not after everything he had endured. He whispered, almost to himself, I'm ready. It wasn't certain. It wasn't confident. But it was the only thing left to say. Max had no idea how long he'd been walking. Time had become a blurred memory, twisted in the same way his mind had. The darkness was no longer just an external force, but something woven into every thought, every heartbeat. He could still hear the whispers, faint but persistent, taunting him like a shadow on the edge of his consciousness. But now, they were different. They no longer felt like an external threat. They felt like a part of him, like an extension of the terror he had grown to know too well. You can't escape, Max. The voice had become a part of his soul. But there was something new now, too. The faintest glimmer of defiance had sparked within him, like a single match lighting in the void. I'm not afraid anymore, he whispered into the silence. He wasn't sure who he was trying to convince, himself or the voice, but it didn't matter. The words felt like a declaration. Something was shifting. The room he stood in now was different. It was still shrouded in darkness, but there was a faint outline of a door at the far end. Max didn't remember this door being there before, but he didn't care. This was his chance, his last chance. As he moved toward the door, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The darkness thickened, wrapping around him, pulling at his limbs as if trying to drag him back into the depths. You can't go through it, Max. It's too late for you. You'll never escape. Max gritted his teeth, pushing forward despite the weight of the shadows trying to drag him back. The door was just ahead now, almost within reach. He reached out, his hand trembling as it grasped the doorknob. The moment his fingers touched it, a jolt of energy surged through his body. It was as if the door itself was alive, resisting him, fighting him. You don't deserve to be free, the voice spat, its tone venomous. You can't outrun me, Max. Max's hand shook violently, but he didn't let go. He had come too far to turn back now. With every ounce of strength he had left, he twisted the doorknob and pulled the door open. The air rushed in cold and sharp. A blinding light poured through, filling the room. The darkness recoiled, screeching in agony as it faded slowly but surely into nothingness. Max stepped through the door, into the light, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he was free. The oppressive weight, the whispers, the figure, everything that had haunted him for so long vanished, leaving nothing but silence. But as Max stood there, bathed in the light, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Something still lingered in the back of his mind, just out of reach. "You may have won this time, Max," a voice whispered from nowhere. Max's breath hitched. The voice, the dark presence, it wasn't gone. It had only been waiting for this moment, for him to lower his guard. "But I'll always be here inside you, watching, waiting." Max turned slowly, his heart racing. The door behind him had closed, but the darkness was never truly gone. It never would be. He had stepped through the threshold, yes, but the real battle was far from over. And this time, he wasn't sure he'd make it out alive. The sunlight hit my face, sharp and real, cutting through the memory of endless shadows. I stood on the street, the city's hum a stark contrast to the silence I'd endured. I was out, free, but the freedom felt incomplete. That chilling whisper, "I'll always be here inside you, watching, waiting." It was gone from the air, yet it still echoed in my mind. A faint tremor, a brand on my soul. Some fights don't truly end. You just learn to live with the echoes. The city feels different now. Every shadow a potential threat, every creak a reminder. I won the battle, but the war, I think, just moved inside. And I'm left wondering, with every passing day, how long can I truly keep these shadows at bay?